Okay, so we are at 1 minute past the hour, so I'm going to kick us off. I'm sure the people keep joining while we're going, but with that, I don't want to keep everyone else waiting any longer. So hello and welcome. This is our second webinar of the series leading up to this year's Congility 2014 annual conference. It's called Data Sets You Free, and I'm delighted to have with us Jonathan Colman of Facebook. I've been in touch with Jonathan for a few years now. We saw each other present at a conference and both recognized that we were thinking along similar lines. And since then, I've been looking forward to having him contribute a talk to the Congility library. If you think about it, Facebook is a great reference company for Congility because on the one side, it's social and multi-device and user-generated content and all that good stuff. But at the same time, it's basically a huge software application. It's a global app with an enormous number of users, has to have extremely high uptimes and a rich API and integration with third-party developers. And I'm sure Jonathan will be able to tell you a punishing development schedule. So it's a great example of the meeting between social, technical, web, and all the other things that we'll be talking about at Congility this year. Jonathan himself brings to us a great combination of user empathy, communication skill, technical knowledge, and a very delightful enthusiasm, as you will see during his session. So I'm looking forward to this, and I think that this is a good session, even for our technical communication crowd who have been doing documentation and manuals and so on, because this is going to show what you can do when you get online and you start to be able to handle incoming information in a way that technical communicators have been looking forward to for years. So do you want to skip me over to the next slide, Jonathan? Okay. So Congility 2014, as I said, this is a promotional webinar. The theme this year is driving revenue from across the enterprise. So we'll be looking at how we can tear down silos between departments and integrate the way that we work and integrate our systems better. This is a promotional webinar, so if you register with the promo code there, JCOL30, before April 30th, you can get 30% off the price of entry. I've got just some of our speakers over on the right, and this event is brought to you by a collaboration of Mecon and Urbina Consulting, the company that I've recently founded. So without any further ado, I've got some people with some audio troubles, and I'll work with them in the sidelines. But Jonathan, take it away.
Good afternoon, Congility. Ow! Well, actually, I suppose it's early evening by GMT standards, but good early evening just didn't sound as good. Hi, this is Data Sets You Free. Analytics for content strategy. I'm your host, Jonathan Colman. I'm a content strategist at Facebook. Previously, before that, I was the principal experience architect at REI, which is a large American co-op that sells outdoor equipment. So I'll be looking at some REI examples here and there. You can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook at jcolman, or find my site at jonathancolman.org. And hey, if you're tired of hearing me already, I want to give you an easy out. You can get to these slides right now at bit.ly/congilitydata. Sorry, I'm just not into that whole brevity thing. But yes, you can get these slides right now. And I do want to give a special shout out, special thanks to Sean Tubrighty, or @Tubes on Twitter, for creating this amazing image with this sort of spreadsheet data bird. I love this, and I think it is the embodiment of data setting you free to fly. You can see more of Sean's work at seantubrighty.com. So, whenever we talk about data, we have to first start off talking about values. And so I want to put it out to you. What do you value? Why do you do what you do? Why are you a technical communicator or a content strategist or an information architect? Why do you do this work? And I'm going to use some symbols to kind of break apart this notion of value so we can explore it a little bit more deeply. First is, if you hold a value, how do you know that you value it? And how do you measure how much you value it? What I think is that we know our values by our desire. Another way of stating desire for a business sense might be the word goal or objective. And we measure that value, especially in relation to our other values, by the actions we take in support of it or towards our values. And we also take a look at the results of those actions. That's what measurement is all about. So what we measure, the data itself, that shows the progress that we make towards our desires, towards our goals. But it doesn't speak for itself. I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make. They'll show you a big spreadsheet of numbers or some chart or maybe an infographic, and they'll say, hey, it's just all there. Can't you see what I see? I actually don't think I can see what you see. I don't think data speaks for itself. I think it requires analysis and interpretation. And something we'll be talking about a little bit later in this webinar is how to present data so that it is most easily understood. I think that's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. The thing is, analysis can't reveal the proper insights without the context for the data. Data doesn't exist by itself. It's part of a larger ecosystem or community. So we need context to reveal the proper insights. It's the lens, if you will, that shows us the real value of our data. So, what do content strategists value? Let's go through a quick list of things that we often talk about, so folks might, reasonably conclude that these are things that we value. Well, we have to start off with clear communication with empathy. Not just empathy for the end user or consumer of that information, but empathy for all the people along the way who make that delivery of communication possible. We'll be talking a bit more about those people, actually. We tend to value multi-dimensional content audits. Here's just a part of one I did for REI. It was about 3,600 pages for a section of the REI.com website. We'll actually be talking a little bit more about how I put this together later on as well. We value information modeling, content structuring. So understanding the context in which our content exists and finding ways to break it down, attach metadata to it, build systems that support a particular use of information so as to create a sort of information space where people can interact with our information and realize their own goals and derive their own values from that information. Content management systems. Naz, actually in his own work, in his own presentations, talks quite a bit about component-based content management, and I think most organizations would probably be very lucky to have a CCMS, a component-based content management system. We spend a lot of time working on content management, on wrangling all the information that we produce and making sure that there's proper authoring workflows and proper delivery to channels as well. Incidentally, side note, CMS is a type of wine you can find in Washington State where I used to live. It's actually a blend of Cab Sauv, Merlot, and Syrah, hence the CMS acronym. And like most content management systems, this wine sucks. So I'd actually steer you away from this if someone ever gives you a bottle. Just word from me to you. Something else we value is robust but nimble publishing workflows. So I talked about having empathy for the people who actually create information and who edit it and touch it and review it and approve it and publish it all on the way to that end user. Empathy does not start and end with our end user. We actually have to have empathy for the people within our organizations and create workflows that allow them to do what they do best, to make use of their strengths and their native geniuses so that we can create the best possible information. So publishing workflows, you'd say, are something that content strategists value. Messaging architecture, brand pillars, voice and tone guides, something we tend to spend quite a bit of time on because we have to understand our brand and we have to know what it is in order to communicate as one. So having those standards and having the guides that help multiple people communicate with one voice, with one tone, is something content strategists value. And straight alongside that is editorial strategy, our content standards. What do we edit against? How do we know that we're writing in a way that supports the brand? That's what this is all about. And you'll see that while most editors have a red pen that we're all too familiar with, this one is blue, and if you look closely, you'll notice it has a smiley face. So editors aren't your enemy. They have, or should have, empathy for you as a writer as well. You'd say we'd value things like content APIs. For example, NPR in 2007, that's how long ago they did this, by the way, launched COPE, or their model for creating once, publishing everywhere, COPE. They improved it in 2008 so that it became a way where they had one system for offering content and a very robust and complex API that would deliver the right version of that content to whatever device the content was actually being used on, whether it's tablet or mobile or desktop web or what have you. Great model, great system. I know a lot of organizations are still working towards this. So you would definitely say that this delivery mechanism and a content API as a tool for delivery is something content strategists value. Alongside, of course, governance, because what good is it to create content standards or editorial voice and tone guide that lasts for just a month or a year or a season of man? We have to be able to formulate systems that support our brand for the next 100 years. That's what governance is all about. Long-term stability, long-term consistency. So this is definitely something content strategists value as well. So that's great. These are all outcomes of content strategy work. And if we could accomplish just a handful of these, I'd say we're already ahead of the game and doing a great job. But the thing is, while they represent best practices, I actually don't think anyone cares about this except for us. I don't want to delude myself that my CEO or yours or anyone I've ever worked for gives a rip about these fine technical details of content strategy. I think it's proper that we care about it, but I don't think we've made sort of the extra step to prove out this value to other people. I don't think anyone cares. I actually think instead they care about business results or organizational results or results towards the mission if you're a not-for-profit organization. They care about data. We talked about the relationship between values, results, and data and context. So let's talk a little bit more about why people care about data rather than best practices. Again, content strategists tend to talk about content for its own sake. We care so much about content. We're so invested in the content creation and the writing process, the editorial, the design, information architecture, usability. It's all on us. We care a great deal about these things. But to most people, when we talk about them, we're only telling one side of the story. We're only talking about content quality. So when we don't use quantitative information as we make our case for quality content experiences, when we don't include data, what happens is that people only see the qualitative side and they feel as if that's something that can be discarded. We're not appealing to the logical parts of their minds. So to other people, when they look at us and when they think about the things we tell them, they see us as our metrics. So this image of measuring spoons is something I'm going to be repeating a lot in this presentation. So I hope you like it. Because to other people, to put it simply, we are what we measure. They see us as a collection of business results as expressed in metrics. So if we're not able to show them those metrics, our work becomes literally valueless and meaningless to them. So if you can't tell your story using data, like this kid reading an algebra book, totally confused, what's going to happen? I think I think you're going to get shut out of meetings. I think we're going to have a hard time getting budget or staff or support for our initiatives. There's something about this kid, this wide-eyed kid looking at the algebra book, that's a lot like us. So I think we're going to be seeing this kid again a little bit later on. You can't tell your story using data. You'll find that your hands get tied. You're not in those important meetings. You don't have the ear of your leaders for the initiatives where you need support, where you need budget. It's going to go to other areas of the business. In effect, you'll be shut out, and you won't be able to win the support of other people because they simply do not value what you do. There's a steep learning curve to using data, and I understand that. The rest of this presentation is really focused on helping you get into the use of data and avoiding some common pitfalls. But here's a tweet, for example, from my friend Mike Pantoliano. He's an analytics genius. He's very good with analytics and data. And he highlights this Google Analytics help document that's very technical and ends with the phrase, "It's all pretty easy." I had a hard time believing that, so I actually checked out the document, and here it is at the end. It's all pretty easy. And they're talking about coding in PHP, marking up variables to create custom dimensions for a Google Analytics report. So in the same way that it's hard for content strategists to ramp up in using data in our work, I actually think it's hard for other people to start using content strategy in their work. So this is a challenge that actually should bring us closer together. A steep learning curve is something we all share and can empathize with. But here's the point.
Jonathan?
I believe that...
I'm just going to jump in for 1 sec and say that your slides are so high quality that they're causing some lag on the line.
Sorry. Okay.
So feel free to click early.
Okay, I shall.
To give us a chance to pick them up. No problem.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, it's all good.
I'm just running through this. Thanks for letting me know.
That's what we get for such nice high-res photos.
Oh, damn the slow internet in the U.S. So here's the point. I think that data literacy is a core content skill. With all those other things I talked about, the content auditing and the voice and tone and the information modeling, the things we think of as sort of being our jobs, I think that data literacy is something that we need to make a place for. I think it is something that is core to everything else we do. And I think that content strategists who are familiar with data and who can use data in their work are going to achieve more and have more impact for the organizations that they support. And that's because data adds clarity to the role that we play within the organization. I mentioned how other people view us by the metrics we produce. We are what we measure. So having data and being able to express our work, not just in qualitative subjective quality, but also in terms of quantitative data, helps other people see the impact that we have. Because it's our job to make organizations endure over time, not just for a season, not just for a campaign or an ad blitz or a tweet, not even just for a year, but for 100 years. That's the role that content strategy plays. That's why we focus on things like consistency and workflows and governance. But we need data to get support and buy-in from our leaders and from the rest of our organization in order to make those things work. So when we use data to guide our actions, and a lot of data, including big data, as you see on this slide, hopefully on the right, when we use data to guide our actions, we'll be able to prove out the value of what it is we do. And I want to show you a quick example from Google, actually. So a few years ago, hopefully you can see the slide, a few years ago, they released a tool called the Public Data Explorer. And it was this nifty little tool that gave people access to public data sets. And it had a little slider, and as you move the slider, the circles on this chart that you see here would grow or shrink or move across the graph. And it was a great way of visualizing information. But to most people, it was sort of a toy. It wasn't really anything that they could use to produce useful information. So later on, Google produced their Flu Trends Explorer, where you could take a look at incidences of flu infection around the world. And as I'm sure you'll remember, hopefully as you remember, last year was actually a record season for flu. And this chart that I'm showing you now was one of the most forwarded things on the internet at basically about a year ago at this time, because we had trends of flu infection that incredibly outpaced anything we'd seen before. And Google helped people understand this and be able to take action on it. So because of this chart and because of what Google did to make this public data accessible, usable, and understandable, a lot more people got communications about how to avoid flu, what to do if they had flu, than they would have otherwise. So this actually had a big impact. And because of that, it gets an Algebra Kid. It gets the Algebra Kid Award of Data Use Excellence in Content, because it's a pretty amazing use of content strategy, information architecture, and user experience to create change. I think this is awesome, amazing work, and the sort of thing that we should be striving for. But in order to accomplish things like that, we have to continue getting rid of silos within our organization. When we don't work together, and when we're not part of cross-functional teams, we have a hard time understanding what kind of data other teams are going to value. So as always, my notion is that we should be tearing down all of the silos, tear down all of them, every single one. And speaking of tearing down silos, Naz wanted me to mention, hopefully you can see this, that if you tweet this phrase, if you were the first to post this on Twitter or Google+, you'll have a chance to win a free pass for the 2014 Congility Conference. I wish I could go. I can't make it this year, but boy, would I love a free pass. So the phrase that pays is tear down all the silos, a cross-silo content strategy event, bit.ly/Congility. Again, if you're the first to post that on Twitter, Google+, and Naz will be checking that, you'll have a chance to win a free pass for the 2014 Congility Conference.
Yay.
So, okay.
We should probably be able to find out the winners by the end of the session.
Yeah. So hopefully Naz will chime back in and let us know who the winners are. That'd be really exciting.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to get that. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. When we tear down the silos in our organization and communicate honestly and openly and directly about the data we value, then we can build something new on top of that rubble. We can build a case for content, a business case, a case that will draw the attention and support of our leaders, of our budget makers, so that we can actually get content strategy the resources it needs. And when you do that, I think you will find that data is what sets you free. So that's the end of our prologue. The rest of this presentation is much more hands-on, and it's much more about do's, don'ts, and how-tos. So we're going to start off with 10 ways to destroy your content with bad data. And I'm going to move through these pretty quick because these are things you should not do. If you find yourself spending time on this, it'd be a good time to step back and reapproach your strategy. So remember that to other people, you are what you measure. So here's our measuring spoons again. Other people see us through the lens of the data that we produce about the impact of our work. So keep that in mind, because measurements influence strategy, and strategy influences action. So the actions we take as content strategists or that other people within our organization take, that's all based on that strategy for what we're trying to achieve out in the world. And as I'm sure you're aware, and it makes perfect sense, bad measurements lead to bad content, like this infographic where I have no idea what's going on or what I'm supposed to do with it or even what to look at first. It's just sort of a mess. It's the job of content strategy to make information clear and useful.
We're not on
measurements.
The infographic yet.
Oh, you're not on the infographic? Wow, there is a serious lag. Wow, sorry about that.
It's funny,
I'll leave this up for a second.
We didn't have that before.
It is a very ugly infographic, so perhaps the webinar is shielding you so your eyes don't bleed.
Okay, we just got it now.
You just got it? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide so that you don't have it for too long. I want to make the point, or I want to make a point from Ben Yaskovitz, who's the author of the Lean Analytics book. He says if a metric won't change the way you behave, then it is a bad metric. You can reach out to Ben at byasko on Twitter. So again, the next things I'm going to show you are contraindications. Do not do these things. These are worst practices. First one is to silo your analysts onto a single team. A lot of organizations do this. It's terrible practice because they end up being stuck with busy work from all the other teams within the organization rather than doing deep dives into data and helping other people understand the data that helps the organization make decisions. Again, break down all the silos. Another thing organizations do is to measure without asking questions. Instead of questioning everything first and then making measurements based on those questions, all analytics work should be started off with questions. We shouldn't be measuring things first just to measure them. That's sort of busy work. Daniel Eisens, for our next point, is a information architect and content strategist with the Understanding Group. And he talks a lot about cognitive psychology, and he talks quite a bit about context in terms of understanding how people make the decisions they make when they're online and how they choose things and what information they consume based on that. So when we ignore the human context, the why, our analytics tell us a lot less. What a lot of people say about analytics is that they're great at telling us what people did, but not why. So we have to break up our analytics by actually going out and talking to real people to understand that why. Another problem is that a lot of organizations tend to focus on one particular metric. It's the metric to rule all other metrics instead of looking at sort of the ecosystem of metrics and a series of metrics that actually tell them more about how their business or how the organization is doing. So something organizations do is to focus, say, on hits, perhaps, at all costs. Another thing organizations do is to focus on followers or fans or some other metric at all costs. A lot of organizations will give, say, for example, their social media team some goal like, okay, by the end of this quarter you will get us 10,000 or 100,000 more Facebook likes or Twitter fans or whatever. If that were my goal, I would be highly incentivized to go out and buy those followers and then just go home for the rest of the year. And I don't think that would line up with an actual business goal. That shows some of the dangers of just focusing on one metric at the cost of all others. And that even goes for conversion. A lot of organizations, especially in the retail space like REI, focus on conversion, and that's great. But we also have to focus on things like loyalty, things like retention. So if we focus on conversion at all costs, it's a bit of a non-starter. We lose the big picture view of our work. A lot of organizations also focus on metrics without defining them. So in this case, engagement. A lot of organizations say, hey, let's focus on engagement this year. This is going to be a year of engagement. We're all going to engage. We'll be engagers with engageroos. And that's great. Except that if you talk with people in the organization, I bet you would find 100 different definitions for what engagement actually is, which means that really the organization is not taking a strategic approach. One hand probably doesn't know what the other is doing. So don't focus on metrics without defining them. Similarly, metrics exist just as we do over a spectrum of time. So there's lead data in metrics that give us insight into what's going or what may be about to happen. But there's also lag data, which gives us more insight into what may be happening further down the road. Metrics, just like people, just like our organizations, exist within sort of a span of time. So we shouldn't just focus on the present moment without considering the further future. Likewise, as we measure, a lot of times, especially again in retail, organizations are focused on what is happening right now, this particular visit. Did someone come to our site right now and in the same visit decide to buy something from us or decide to engage with us or follow us or whatever it is we're trying to get them to do? Attribution matters. So a lot of times people don't make a purchase on their first visit. It takes a series of visits, as we'll look at a little later, to get them to sort of pull the trigger on that purchase or on that engagement or on becoming a partner or whatever it is we're trying to get people to do. So sometimes it's 7 days, sometimes it's 1 month, sometimes it can be years, especially for larger ticket purchases or other types of engagement that have a steep curve. It's not just a simple decision, it requires a lot of research. So we have to look at how people perform with our content over time. So don't act on data without attribution. And finally, a lot of organizations set and forget their metrics. They want the easy button for metrics, and I just don't think that's a good approach. I think that we have to look at our metrics just as we look at our strategies and our goals regularly over time. And as our goals and strategies change and evolve, so should our metrics. So those are the 10 things you shouldn't do. Let's jump in and look at 10 things that are helpful for building an analytics-driven content strategy. Here's those measuring spoons again. You are what you measure. Other people see you by the virtues of the data that you produce. If you're not tired of hearing that from me yet, I think this is the last time. I don't think we bring it up again. So just keep that in mind. The next 10 metrics I'm about to show you are all focused on helping you understand how your content performs so you can tell the story of your work to other people. So first, Avinash Kaushik is one of the world's greatest analysts, and he talks quite a bit about the model of analysis that involves acquisition, behavior, and outcomes. A lot of us, when we use analytic systems, usually just look for a metric or two. What are our visits? What's our traffic like? What's sales? What's conversion? Without looking at the big picture of how people actually interact with our organization. And that's what this model is all based on: acquisition, behavior, and outcomes. So one of the things you can do that's pretty awesome is if you use Google Analytics, and a lot of organizations do, you can build a customized intelligent dashboard that is set up along this continuum of acquiring people into your funnel, analyzing their behavior and seeing how they interact with your content, and then measuring the outcomes of those engagements in terms of revenue or conversions or partnerships or sales or whatever it is your organization is doing. And furthermore, you don't have to do that yourself. Google Analytics provides what they call a solutions gallery, where a number of people have created dashboards like this one, open source them, so that you can just sort of install them directly into your Google Analytics account. It's 5 minutes work, and it's pretty amazing because you end up with this great dashboard that might have taken you quite a bit of time to create on your own.
I'm going to
because
pipe in
that's
there,
so awesome.
Jonathan.
Oh yeah, please.
Because
Yeah.
when we talked about this in the practice, we talked about the fact that for technical communicators especially, this is one where there's so much opportunity on the table. Because if you come from a print background or your processes are for offline deliverables, if you did go online, the power of understanding your users as something like Google Analytics can offer you is totally unprecedented.
Definitely. And a lot of us, and I know this from my own personal experience, it's hard to get into sort of the cycle, the process of measuring the impact of your work, especially when you have so much other work to do. But like Naz said, I think it actually is helpful and powerful because it does offer insights as to how you are doing, not just qualitatively, but in the actual quantity of results that you produce.
I think we forgot to mention in the intro, Jonathan, also your pedigree in terms of the breadth of your understanding of communications in that in your experience with IBM.
Yeah, I should have mentioned actually.
You're breaking up there, Jonathan. Oh,
Can you hear me? How about now?
okay. They say you're okay. All right.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully
Good.
it's just
Okay.
me.
Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. God help you if you used to use, if you ever used the AS400, because I used to write documentation for it back in the late 90s. So all of you fans of OS 400 out there, especially during the late 90s, you probably came into contact with things I wrote, and I deeply apologize. I was not a very good technical communicator. But yeah, I used to hand code HTML, which, as anyone can tell you, is not fun. So yeah, so Google Analytics dashboards that you can install, download and install directly into your account, make it really, really easy. Next, this actually doesn't have a lot to do with metrics at all, but it is really important for organizations. We should be aligning metrics with the things that we measure with the organization's core values and vision for what it is they're trying to achieve in the world. A lot of organizations don't do this. They think they're doing one thing in the world, but they choose a set of metrics to measure their progress that doesn't align with that and has nothing to do with what they think they're trying to achieve. So questions for content strategists to ask, especially since as writers, as communicators, you'll be trying to figure out what are our brand pillars, how should we be talking with people, how should we be communicating with them. You can just be blunt and ask, hey, what are our core values? Why are we here? What purpose does this organization have for existing? What are we trying to achieve? Is it just incremental sales? Is it something different? Knowing that can help you produce better information. And alongside that, you need to know what is the organization's vision for success? How will we know when we have achieved a particular goal or all of our goals? What does the world look like and what is our place in it when we've reached that point of success? Knowing that can help us select better metrics for our work. Likewise, we need to ask, what makes us different? How does our organization stand out as compared to the competitive landscape? Which is to say, why should people choose us? Why should they do business with us or become our partners or support our work? Knowing those differentiators can help us compose much better information that's much more useful to people, help us stand out from our competitive set. And likewise, what could make us act differently? Remember what Ben Yoskovitz said when he said that any metric that doesn't change the way we behave is a bad metric. So we want to choose metrics based on our core values that help us pivot and create change as we gain insights from them. Those are the kinds of metrics that we should be choosing. So you can learn more about core values and content strategy from this link. Oh, and I should mention, all the links in this presentation are clickable, so they all go out to more information. So when you download the slides, again at bit.ly/congilitydata, you can click on these links to get to more documentation, more tools, and resources. Next, a lot of organizations tend to look at their data from the standpoint of all of it, in aggregate, all at once. This is how everyone is perceiving us, how everyone is interacting with us. And while that's true, I think we can actually do a lot better than that. So something that most analytic systems allow you to do is to narrow down your data to custom-defined segments. So you're not just looking at everything in aggregate, you're looking at particular kinds of people, particular audiences. So something you can do in Google Analytics is it comes sort of out of the box, if you will, with a number of default segments that you can choose, usually set up by channel. So people who come to your website from, say, a search engine or from another website or from social media or traffic that you pay for, maybe in terms of advertising. But you can also create custom segments on your own, maybe traffic that clicks on a certain thing on your website or traffic that's on your website for less than 10 seconds, as you can see in this example. Michelle Kiss is a wonderful analyst, and not only can you click through here to get to documentation from Google, but she's set up a number of custom segments that you can actually reuse in your Google Analytics account as well. I mentioned earlier the problem with focusing on conversion and not retention. So a lot of marketers will focus on traffic, and that's wonderful in terms of that acquisition part of the life cycle. But we also have to focus on retaining those people, on growing their loyalty. And that's not something that tends to get, in terms of metrics, a lot of play within the organization, even though it's supremely important. So here's a screen from Google Analytics that shows this is the frequency and recency report. And you'll notice that for people who visit once, that tends to make up the huge bulk of visits, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of people come to our website once to check us out. Maybe they heard about us. Maybe they're clicking through on something. But they don't tend to come back. And you can see here a dearth for the amount of people who visit 2 times, 3 times, even 6, 7, and 8 times. But as you get to the bottom, the 9 to 14 bracket, the 15 to 25 visit bracket, the 26 to 50, there's quite a bit of engagement happening there. These are our loyal people. These are the people who are returning to our website, who are getting a better understanding of who we are and what services and products and partnerships and whatever else it is we do, all those things that we offer. We should be segmenting these people using the tools I talked about earlier, and perhaps consider creating custom content for them, because they're not the first-time visitor anymore. They already know who we are. We can probably do a better job of communicating with them. Likewise, there's also a days since last visit report. And you can see similarly here, while most people, most of the activity happens on the same day, or maybe even in the same particular visit, and there's a big trail off after there, we do see people coming back a week or 2 later, sometimes a month later, and they're engaging with us again. So this is an opportunity for us to speak out to those people in particular, because they have a loyalty, and they're probably people who are considering bigger engagements, bigger conversions, bigger purchases perhaps, or partnerships with us. So don't forget about those people. You can also get more details about these loyalty reports, again, from Avinash Vashik, Master Analyst. The next thing is to rethink what we consider to be bounce rates. And this is a little complicated, but a bounce on our website is when someone visits and then does not view any other page on our website. So they are said to bounce. So they land on our site, they don't do anything else, and then they bounce away to some other website. And this actually probably makes up a pretty big amount of pretty much everyone's traffic. And a high bounce rate is an indicator that something in our content is not meeting the expectations of the people visiting us. So we have to find a way to do better. That's what bounce rate is all about. The thing is, most analytics systems have a hard time measuring bounce rate because there's not a lot of interactions. So in this case, a person might have visited us for 2 minutes and 13 seconds and engaged with us by creating a bookmark or taking a URL and saving it to their desktop, which is actually a positive intent in terms of they mean to come back. But our analytics system can't pick that up. Likewise, sometimes people will visit our website for a longer time than we think because the last known interaction occurs, say, maybe a minute into their visit, but they actually stay much longer. And our analytics systems can't figure that out. So there's a solution for this that involves updating the tracking code that's embedded on every web page of your site. And you can get documentation and learn how to do this directly from Google. But what it does is sort of check every 15 seconds to say, hey, visitor, are you still here? The visitor doesn't know this is happening. Their experience isn't disrupted, but we can get a much better idea of how long people spend on our sites, which gives us a better sense of how they're engaging with our content. So we can get a better idea of if it's meeting their expectations and working for them. Another thing we can do is the depth of engagement. We talked about how visitors behave with our content over time. Now let's take a look at how deeply they go into our websites. So you can see here that in this particular case, for this analytics screen, most visitors got only 1 page deep. So every time that we can get a person to click through to another web page, that's another chance to engage them with maybe the content they were looking for, or maybe tell a better story about our brand or our products or services or what we're trying to achieve out in the world. So looking at the depth of people's visits with us can give us a better idea of whether or not our content is engaging them properly. So Justin Cutroni is another wonderful analyst, and he has all kinds of ways to help you track engagement with content. So definitely click through on that link. Another thing we should be looking at is the frequency of interactions over time. So here's a great report about path length in interactions. Oops, I didn't mean to go ahead there, sorry. Where we can look at conversions and the value of that conversions, the value of those conversions, depending on how much of our content people have actually clicked through. And I think what is sort of interesting about this is that we begin to get a notion of how much time it takes for someone to convert with us. And in this case, 36% of the conversions for this particular website that we're looking at in this report happen not on the same day that someone visits for their first visit. It takes a while for them to convert. And you can see at the bottom there, the 12 plus days, over a quarter of conversions take that long to actually happen. So again, a lot of organizations chase quick money, particularly in the retail sector. They try to get someone to convert immediately. But the truth is that we need to create content that helps us build a relationship with those customers so that they're compelled to come back to us, to use us to research that purchase, and then eventually to convert with us after some time has passed. That's the sort of thing we should be optimizing for.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
As a lot of our Congility audience are often in B2B medical devices and enterprise products, could you talk a little bit about how that might apply to that kind of thing at the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah, so in that case, I'd say there's even more lag time because you're not just looking at a small purchase, you know, a $5 purchase, a $10 purchase. It might be a $250,000 purchase. It might be a several $1,000,000 purchase. Those purchases don't happen after one visit, right? That requires in-person relationships, that requires contracts. You need to build content that supports that sort of B2B purchase cycle, which probably takes months, if not years. That's the sort of life cycle of your customer that you should be optimizing your content for. You can learn more about how to use this conversion paths report by clicking on this link. The next step is to look at micro-conversions. So especially for that longer purchase cycle in the B2B setting that you were talking about, Naz, micro-conversions help us get a better sense of where people are along the path to converting with us. So here we see a product page from REI, and of course the primary conversion point, the primary call to action, is to add this product to your cart. That's the macro conversion. That's where someone is pulling the trigger on the purchase. But what we often forget to track, and this really gets up to the value of our content and the value of the interfaces that we create around our content, is all the micro conversion possibilities. So if someone clicks that, say, that Find in Store button, that is a significant that's a significant detail that gives us the sense that someone has intent to purchase this product locally near them in a store. They want to touch the product. They want to see it. They want to ask other people about it. They want to get information from the salespeople about it. Maybe they want to try it out. So someone clicking Find in Store, that's a micro conversion. Someone who looks at the reviews for this product, another micro conversion. Someone who might share it out on a social network, another micro conversion. Even zooming in on the product to take a look at it in finer detail, micro conversion. These are all signifiers as to someone's intent to ultimately purchase from us, even if they don't do it right now. Again, Avinash Kaushik has wonderful tips for understanding micro conversions and measuring them in your content.
I just wanted to point out there as well, Jonathan, that for a lot of the people who are making after-sales content, I think that micro-conversions are a really fascinating addition to the conversation because if you look at this interface here with big product image and then lots of metadata and content around that big product image, that looks like a lot of interactive manuals and dashboards that you're seeing for documenting a device after you buy it. So you want to know if people have zoomed in on it, are they using the features you've added to your content, even after they've bought it, because you want to track whether your content is actually doing what you had designed it to do.
Yep, totally agree. So building in opportunities like that to your interfaces, to your content, can give you a better sense of how it's performing along that purchasing life cycle, which again may be months or years. Totally agree. Another thing we have to track is how content impacts our total customer acquisition costs. So this is really where we take all those little metrics that we've been talking about and bubble them up to the form of a budget. So here we're looking at how much does it take in terms of our organization's budget to actually acquire a new customer? And then what is our return on investment for acquiring that customer? So this is a number of metrics all put together in one big report where we begin to understand not just what we're spending, but what impact it has on growing our organization's, in this case, revenue. But it could be anything. It could be getting partnerships. It could be acquiring influencers, or really whatever it is you're tracking. So this helps us understand the value of our work as content producers, and it helps us understand where we stand within our organizations as we begin to look at, say, in this case, advertising or marketing or partnerships or whatever else it is that the organization is doing. So having all those little metrics and bubbling them up to a report like this online marketing budget gives us a sense of really how we're doing and where we need to go to improve our place. So Melissa Rock is a great content strategist, and she's done a talk about proving out the value of your content that I really recommend you view to get a better sense of this. And finally, determining our multi-channel mix. So another thing I used to do was SEO, organic search marketing, and I focused on just SEO. So I had the freedom to think of just my organic search customers, and that's actually a short-sighted view. And it's true of any channel, whether it's SEO or advertising or social media or something else. So something that Google Analytics lets you do is look at all of those little channels together, so you can begin to see the overlap in terms of where your customers or your visitors or your engagers or influencers are coming from. And there is overlap. Most of the time, people have multiple touches through different channels as they engage with you. So the top conversion paths report in Google Analytics, which should come up here in a second, is a screen in Google Analytics that helps you understand all those different touches, and it groups them by how often people actually come in based on a particular selection of channels. So you can see the number one here is first a person gets a display ad that they click on to visit your site. Their second touch is a paid search ad, and by then they're familiar enough with your organization so that they come through on a direct load, which is like a bookmark or typing your URL directly into their browser. You can see there's quite a bit of diversity here. These are just the top 10 reports of what turns out to be almost 13,000 different path combinations. So your channels should really be all working together, but in most organizations that doesn't happen. Each channel has a specialist that creates their own content. There isn't a lot of crossover, and they don't work together to create a holistic experience. But the thing is, customers surf through all these different channels. So you can just see that right here in this report. So this is impetus for us to improve the quality of our content and create standards that work across all channels. Mike Pantoliano, who I talked about earlier, has a great article and talk about attribution modeling, which is what this type of work is called. Highly suggest you check that out, because this screen, which should come up soon for you, I hope, is what I show here is something like 40 or 50 different touches it took for a single customer to convert. And in those, in all those touches, they cross social media, they cross organic search, they cross direct load, they cross referrals from other websites. It takes all of those touches just to make one customer convert. And we talked about context earlier, and I mentioned Daniel Eisen's work. This is what context looks like in analytics. And that, my friends, earns an algebra kid for being awesome, because you probably didn't think that data is something that could show you context, but this is what it looks like when it does. So this is what we call the multi-channel funnel, and so click on this link to get more information about how you can begin to optimize your content against that. And there's a bonus metric, measuring your market share. We'll go through this really quickly, but something that I bet you didn't know you could do with data is determine your share of voice within the market. So if you are trying to go after a particular, say, keyword, if you're a paid search advertiser or organic search doing SEO, there are tools you can use, reports you can get that show you how often people see your messages in relation to other people doing advertising or organic search marketing. A tool like Experian helps you understand where the clicks are being earned. So maybe it's you, maybe it's your competitors. Experian can give you a sense of that. And John Doherty is a marketer who's written up an article that can help you understand how to use these tools. So click through on that link for more information. So we've seen 10 metrics that or 10 ways of analyzing metrics that we should do, and we've seen 10 metrics that we should use to measure the value of our content. And now let's look at 2 simple ways to work with data and to start improving our data literacy and make this work much easier for us to use in communicating the value of our content. So the first thing we're going to do is to look at live data in Excel. If you're like me, and I am, you probably used to do a content audit by doing things like having your analytics screen in one window, and then having Excel in another window, and then copying and pasting back and forth, so you could line up, visits or conversion or bounce rate or whatever it is with particular metrics. With particular URLs with rows in your content audit. There's a lot easier ways of doing that, and we're going to look at one of them. For this, I'm going to be using the Google Analytics data in Excel tool called Excellent Analytics. There are many tools that do this. This is one I happen to use, but if it doesn't work for you, if you don't like it, there are other ones you can try. I'm going to step through this pretty quick. I hope there isn't too much lag in the screens, because this is a simple how-to that you're probably better off looking at offline, but I wanted to make sure you see how easy this is. First thing first, you install the software, you get a window like that. What you'll see when you do that is that in Excel there will be a new menu for Excellent Analytics, and you can click through that menu to get options. Among other things, you'll see that there's a bunch of new icons in this Excellent Analytics tag, and the one you'll be clicking on is the one labeled Account. And so once you do that, you reach the hardest part of this process, and it doesn't seem like it, but it is. It is signing in to your Google Analytics account. Now, if you're a content strategist, you may not know what that sign-on information is, and you may actually have a hard time getting it from other people in your organization. But once you do, you'll be able to sign in and start using this tool. And the rest of it is actually much, much easier. So the first thing you'll do is to click on this New Query button. And from there, you get, in Excel, a series of screens that are remarkably similar to a typical web analytics tool. So in this one, what we're going to do is set a date range for the data that we want to include in our content audit. I'm just going to select, a couple of days here. And in this next screen, we choose the dimension. So think of this as the leftmost column, column number 1 of your content audit. When I do an audit, that's usually URLs. So that's what I'm including here, but Google Analytics calls that page path, so that was what I've selected. The next thing I do is to say, hey, what metrics do I want in this report? So for each URL in my content audit, maybe I want, visits. Maybe I want bounce rate. Maybe I want conversion. Maybe I want site speed. That would be pretty interesting to include. So let's do that too. You can set up filters if you want. In the case of my content audit, I think I just want to look at maybe just a particular part of the website that I'm auditing, not the entire thing, which would be tens and hundreds of thousands of pages. So I might filter against that. And then maybe you have access to a number of Google Analytics profiles. In this case, I'm just going to select the one for rei.com because I want to make sure that that's the only data that I get. So I'm going to select that one, and voila! I can't wait for the screen to load for you because this is a big deal. In my content audit, I looked at 3,600 pages across rei.com. It would have taken me probably weeks to copy and paste all that information. And here, I have it all after just 5 minutes work. Downloading, installing some software, connecting my Google Analytics account, choosing the metrics I want, and boom, it's all right here ready to go. All of this quantitative data that I can use to find opportunities, to rank problems, and to communicate the value of the content that I produce. Boom. And that, my friends, earns an algebra kid because it's pretty awesome. This is a trick that will save you hours, days, weeks of time and lead to much better audits because they include data. And furthermore, if you ever need to make any changes, all you have to do is click the Update Query button in that excellent analytics menu. And you can change the date range, you can add metrics, you can take metrics out, and it's all pretty easy. So I'm going to show you some more resources for using live data in your reports now. If you want to audit live SEO and social data, you can include those driven by live data in your reports. And once the screen loads, you'll see that I've done that in my content audit. I've included things like links to my site, how many Facebook likes or tweets or Google pluses a particular URL has received, which can help me identify where there are problems or where content is performing exceptionally well. Some of the tools you can use for that are SEO Gadget, which has a tool you can build into Excel and use to get this data updated live. So as it changes out in the world, your spreadsheet will update automatically when you refresh it. That's pretty exciting. Saves you a lot of work. SEO tools for Excel does pretty much the same thing. It's just built out into a more of a menu format. And it includes all kinds of things. You can even scrape content from the web using SEO tools for Excel. So that is another great tool to check out. And then the Moz blog has a great post about all kinds of APIs that you can use to analyze the performance of content all over the web, including your competitors. So that's another great resource for understanding how to use data in your reports. Stop cutting and pasting. We can do a lot better than that. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to use conditional formatting in Excel. So when you have your content audit all ready to go, the next big piece of work is to be able to see opportunities with clarity. That is to make sure that the problems, or opportunities as I call them, rise to the top so that you can take productive action on them. So here I'm going to show you a recent content audit that I did for rei.com. Again, this is the one that had 3,600 pages, all broken down into sections, tons of live data, tons of metrics, all sorts of things going on. And once the screen loads for you, you'll be able to see just a section of that. But it was very complex, and there's a lot of data in here. Now, what you'll notice once this loads is that certain columns and certain cells are highlighted in red. Those are ones that I've highlighted as being opportunities for improvement. But the thing is, to go through 3,600 pages and highlight these by hand would have taken, again, weeks. And that's a problem because I don't have weeks to do this work. I'd rather spend that time taking action, not just marking up an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to zoom in on just one particular part of this audit. Just two columns. One column is the browser title for a particular URL that I'm looking at. Maybe it's a home page or something for the section that I'm looking at. Maybe it's product pages. Maybe it's something else. The next thing, or the next column I'll look at, is the length of that browser title. And that's an Excel formula where I can have Excel count for me how long that title is in characters. So that's what you can see here, the browser title and then the length of that title. And so the reason why that's important is because when people search for content that's on our websites, if the browser title is too long, it gets truncated. In this case, a page on REI.com has the title Learn at REI, a collection of outdoor learning resources to boost, I'm sure it's to boost something, but I don't know what that is because it gets truncated and there's an ellipsis, and I don't have a good experience as a searcher, and there's a ton of data showing that results like that do not get clicked on. So we can do better than that. So let's focus on just this title length column. And now I'm going to show you how to use conditional formatting to create those highlights for you auto-magically. So the first thing we do is click on the conditional formatting button. This is on the home screen in Excel for any spreadsheet. The next thing we do is click on the highlight cells rules, and that's part of the pop-down menu that's under conditional formatting. And from there we click on greater than, which leads us to a dialog where for the cells we've highlighted, all we have to do is say what is the value where we should highlight these cells automatically. In this case, REI had a content standard where the browser title length should not be any longer than 65 characters. And so I type that in here, and the default sort of highlight is red, so that's great. And voila, now I can see very clearly and very easily where the problems are in this content audit. I don't have to worry about the things that aren't highlighted. Now, instead of looking at everything in aggregate, I can see how the opportunities rise to the top, and those are the things that I should take action on and start rethinking my content so that I can have a greater impact. And so when you do that for every column in your content audit, immediately you get a big sense of where the problems are on your website and where you need to focus your time in order to do whatever it is your organization is doing. Make sales, create engagement, drive more traffic, create partnerships, whatever it is you're trying to do in the world. And so when you do a large audit, in particular, in this case a 3,600-page one, you begin to have an understanding of how content affects the customer experience and where you, the content creator, technical writer, content strategist, can make a big difference. So that's great. Even where you don't have a standard for content, like say site speed, you can use a simple tool in Excel to help understand where you need to take action on that as well. And in this case, all I'm going to do is focus in on the site speed factors columns in my audit. And here you can see I've measured their average page load time in Google Analytics and assigned them a score and so on. And all I'm going to do is calculate the average for that entire column in Excel using a formula like this. And it's just a simple average formula. This is actually built into Excel, so you can pick this from an Excel dialog, or if you're more handy in Excel, you can type it by hand, of course, as well. But in this case, the average for this particular column for page load time is 4 seconds. So I would set up conditional formatting in this case to highlight anything that is greater than 4 seconds, so that I know that those are the worst pages and the ones where I should improve the page load time, because that has a big impact on the user experience. So there are tons of more things that you can do with conditional formatting. This is just a tiny, simple example. This is actually quite a powerful tool, and if you click through this link, you'll see more tips for using it in your work. And finally, the last part of this presentation is data visualization. So once we have our data, once we ourselves have gained insight and clarity from it, we need to figure out what we can do to make all of those learnings and all of that knowledge accessible to other people. So what we're going to look at here is basically 8 rules for data visualization that I am stealing from the master, Edward Tufte. And this is the book that they appear in. So I highly suggest you pick this up or attend one of the seminars, or hopefully both, because he is quite wonderful, and these rules stand the test of time. These work in all cases. So the first and foremost rule is to actually show our data. Sometimes we can forget to do this, and there are many rules for how we show it, but the number one thing we must do is make sure that the data is displayed and that it's complete in and of itself. So here's an example of where someone has done that. There's a legend, there's a key, there's X and Y axes. This sort of chart or this sort of graph tells us a story because it includes data. It's the number one thing we have to do. That's our sort of ticket to get into the door, if you will. Now the next thing we have to do is make sure that our data has a purpose and that it has a story to tell. So in this case you can see fisheries in 1900, and you can see the diversity, complexity, and volume of those fisheries versus later on in the year 2000, where you can see a big drop-off and you can see how that's changed. This tells us a story about the productivity of those fisheries, and it helps people who make decisions in terms of managing those fisheries take action. So this is a useful data visualization because it serves a purpose. Now another thing we should do is to avoid distortion, which in terms of how Doherty talks about this, he says, avoid distortion, always tell the truth. So on the left here, we see a chart that shows the Nobel Prizes awarded in science to a handful of countries, and it looks like there's a huge drop-off all the way on the right. But the thing is, that rightmost column in the x-axis, for every other period that it measures shows a whole decade, but the rightmost column only shows half a decade. So the story looks like all these countries are failing to win Nobel Prizes. They must suck at science. What's going on? But if we expand out that rightmost column to be 10 years, we actually see that the productivity continues. And it's because the author of this chart cheated with the x-axis and told a different story than the one that reality actually shows. So avoid distortion, always tell the truth in our work. Something else Doherty talks about is he has this notion of presenting many numbers in a small space. And if you look at this chart,
Jonathan?
Yeah.
I just want to ping you there because we were 13 minutes past the hour, and probably most people kind of book
Oh, no. Oh, I'm
hour.
so sorry. We must be running over. I am so sorry about that. Wow. Well, I'll go through these really quick because I want to make sure we have time to do the sign-off. The point here from Doherty is to aim for data density, but make sure that that data is accessible. So that you're not just sort of spamming them with information, but you're making sure that data is actually useful and usable. This is one of the most famous charts in all of data visualization once it pops up for you. Sorry, I've been going slow because I have this readout here that shows me when the slides are loading, so I'm trying to give them time to load. This shows the rise and fall of Napoleon's army as he approaches Russia and his eventual retreat. And the width of that bar shows how many soldiers are still with him. So this is a visualization that makes that data set coherent, and it actually helps tell a story about that data, which is something that all of our visualizations should do. Another thing we should do is use the least amount of what Doherty calls ink. He says use the least amount of ink possible when you're creating a data visualization. So the goal is not to create complexity, but to actually make the complex clear, which is a quote I'm stealing from Abby the IA. So in this case, a designer has visualized all the restaurants she's visited in Manhattan Island, and all we see is a silhouette for the island with different color marks to indicate how frequently she visits a particular restaurant in the area. So we can sort of see where she goes. There's not a lot of extraneous information here. It tells a very simple story because it does not use a lot of ink. Another thing we need to do, according to Doherty, is to avoid excess what he calls chart junk, just the little widgets and doodads and figures and things that we put on charts that usually don't add a lot to the story. In this case, I've taken a chart that you can see here, and I've tried to make it much simpler, which you'll see in the next slide, by omitting the distractions. So I don't even know what this chart shows, but what I've tried to do is redesign it so that the story it tells is much more clear. I've kept all the same bands and all the same information, but I've removed everything else that does not actually help communicate the story. So I don't even know what that chart showed, but what I've tried to do is make it simpler. In this case, I've even taken the extra step of removing ink so that I don't have to show the y-axis. I've removed colors from each of the bands in those rows that you see to create the impression of a y-axis so that we don't lose that data. But I've done that by actually removing information. And the final example is to show an accessible story with many layers of detail. So once this loads, you'll see that this is a detailed view on cancer statistics for many different types of cancers spread out amongst the axes of age, gender, localization, and implication. So what the designer has done here is to create a system that takes all this data and allows you to track just certain portions of it. So maybe you're interested in a particular type of cancer, maybe lung cancer in this case. If you select that within the system that this designer has created, you can see how lung cancer is broken out amongst genders, ages, and the implication of the lung cancer. That is a story with many layers of detail. That's the way we should be thinking about visualizing our data so that we can offer a sense of its scope while not sacrificing any of the usability or usefulness of that data. So I'm going to skip through some of these other examples, but the goal is to use our data to tell a story in the smallest amount of time, using the least amount of what Doherty calls ink, in the smallest space possible. In the rest of this talk, I offer a ton more resources about how to use data and some free tools for doing things like creating your own infographics. I would just warn you to make sure you pay attention to Doherty as you do that. But what I want to make sure you understand as we close off this webinar is that yes, you can. Yes, you can use data in your content strategy work. And when you do that, you'll find that it unties your hands. It helps you win budget and support and headcount and staff and buy-in for your strategy. You'll find that using data in your arguments along with arguments about the quality of content helps open the doors that are closed to you within your organization. So really, whatever it is you do within your organization, when you express it with data, you will find that you'll make a lot more progress and you'll have a lot more impact towards your goals. So in the end, data really is what sets you free within your organization. You'll have that impact, you will realize those strategies, you will align with your core values, and you will change the way your organization is perceived in the world, all with content strategy, all supported by data. So that is it for this talk. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I've run over. Again, I'm Jonathan Colman. I'm a content strategist for Facebook, and I want to make sure you can get these slides. You can get them at bit.ly/congilitydata. With that, I'm going to hand things back over to Naz.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. That was, I think you had enough in there for 2 webinars.
Yeah, that's probably true. There's quite a bit there.
Yeah,
I'm used to going through this pretty fast. I'm so sorry about the page load or the slide load speed. I wasn't anticipating that.
No problem, no problem. I want to say thank you very much to the people who have stayed on the session, even though we are into the next hour block. If you want to skip down to the last slide, Jonathan, do you have the blue one?
Yep, it's loading right now.
Okay. We've got a couple questions. One was on bounces. You mentioned bounces, and someone asked if there's a kind of a metric that they should be shooting for. What is a good bounce rate?
Yeah, that depends completely on you. A lot of people ask for things like, well, what's the standard for something like bounce rate or conversion or maybe page load time? And the thing is, there really is no standard because all businesses and institutions and organizations are pretty different, and so is their content, and rightfully so. What I would say is, as the content strategist or technical communicator, just know what the bounce rate for your content is. That alone is a pretty big step forward. If you know right off the bat that you're losing, say, 30% of the people who visit your content within the first 10 seconds, that probably says something about how that content is working for them. And that's really the thing you should be trying to improve. So don't look for an industry standard, or don't look for what might be an average across your sector, no matter what it is you do. Try to figure out what works for the people who are actually trying to use your content, and trying to keep inching it upward.
Okay, thank you. I think that a lot of content in here was useful for people who are working both pre and post sales, but possibly some of the post sales might struggle to apply it to themselves. So I've got one here that says, my work and my content are almost completely after sale. So tracking a conversion to sale or market share isn't something that I really connect with. Can I still get value of some of the kind of reports that you were showing?
Sure. So depending on where those after-sale experiences occur, assuming that they occur online, but even if they don't, you can track data like the number of after-sale touches. So if you're doing documentation for a product, let's say, that people buy, maybe traffic to that documentation is a good thing because it shows that people are engaging with the product or with the service. Maybe it's a good thing if, for example, if they are trying to troubleshoot the product, or if they have questions about how to get the most use out of it or how it works, you're providing them with a valuable service. So you can do things like track things like, say, bounce rate, which show you how people interact with that help content. If you have a high bounce rate, it may be that that help content isn't meeting their needs. Likewise, you can have custom metrics like, was this help content actually useful to you in solving the problem that you had? You see that in a lot of help content. I think we should be bold and measure ourselves against metrics like that, so we don't just sort of have a notion of subjective quality that's in our heads, but we make the subjective objective. And we actually put ourselves in front of customers and try to figure out how we can serve them better.
Okay, that's. I also personally, I was thinking when you showed that one in the market share, could you do something like, if you have various products or various sources of information, would you be able to measure your own publications against themselves? So can I compare, this area of my overall content set to some other area?
Yeah, well, with the market share report, that's really more aggregate, and it tends to be more on impressions within a sector, or sometimes for particular keywords.
Mm-hmm.
But you could probably get an idea of maybe how different parts of your site are performing by using some of those custom segments. So you can create a custom segment for like people who are pre-purchase, people who are post-purchase, because they'll have a cookie, things like that, which might give you an idea of how to sort of play those two off of each other.
Okay, cool. I've got one more. Does so-called content marketing have an impact on timed conversion? So if you've got the idea, if you have good, useful content in your site, you might build engagement with people, but they might also take longer for a person to buy.
Yeah. So the point of content marketing, or one of the points of content marketing, is to help create more touches, especially with new people who may not have experience with your brand or maybe with your products or services. So what content marketing is useful for doing is widening the top of the funnel, getting more people who are aware of your brand or aware of what you do, and then helping them begin to get that sort of first touch engagement with you. Now, that can drive purchases, right? But like we said earlier, what you're ultimately trying to do is to build a relationship with people over time, because a lot of people don't buy or convert or choose to engage with you right away on that very first visit, no matter how good your content marketing is. So what you need to do is get them in the door or get them into the top of the funnel with your content marketing. But as we saw in that multi-channel attribution report, continue to engage with them in other ways as they move about their journeys and trying to fulfill their own goals online. So maybe following up with paid search advertising for keywords that they're interested in based on that original content marketing piece, or trying to optimize for organic search so that as they search for those things, you rise to the top for those organic search results. Or maybe following up your content marketing with an email opt-in so that you can talk with them directly through permission marketing.
I also want to chime in there with the fact that I'm talking to a lot of my customers about the idea that content marketing is the opportunity for pre-sales and post-sales communicators to come together. Because post-sales, you have a lot more of the attention of the customer because they've bought already. So they're no longer going to pre-sales sites or pre-sales landing pages. They're going to their post-sales content that's going to support them or enable things and the things that they want to do. So if you can do content marketing by giving them tutorials, or did you know that your product can do this, or updates on the functionality or stuff like that, that is really straddling the line between the two. And if you include any kind of offers in there or ways to re-engage or upgrade or cross-grade, then you really are using what was post-sales content as content marketing.
Yep, spot on.
Okay, so we're coming up on the half hour, so I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you everybody who's still here. And I must say I'm surprised that is most of you. So thank you very much for hanging out. You can see that promo code on the screen still. And the last thing I have to do before we wrap up is announce who won our Twitter off. And that was, sorry if I'm mangling this name, Ruben Tosman, who Twittered.
Go Ruben! Woo!
Go Ruben! Yeah, 34 minutes ago. And so I will be contacting Ruben by email after the session, and I will contact everybody who attended when the webinar recording is available. Those people who had to leave or those people who really feel they could use a second go through some of this will be able to get benefit out of that. Otherwise, I hope to see you all this June, if not at our next webinar. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Jonathan.
Thanks so much.
And I'll see you next time.
All right.